Welcome back to Full Spectrum Frontiers, the show where we break down the complex world of national security, defense, and all the big picture conflicts that impact your daily life. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we're diving into a topic that might surprise you. It's not about missiles, it's not about tanks, it's about farmland. Yep, you heard that right. Farmland. I know. You're probably thinking, Bennett, what does farmland have to do with national security? Stick around, and by the end of this episode, you'll be looking at your plate of mashed potatoes a whole lot differently. But before we jump in, a quick reminder to like, share, and leave a review for the podcast. Your support helps get this info out to more people who might not realize how much the full spectrum of security impacts their everyday lives. All right, now that we've got that covered, let's get to it. Did you know foreign entities own over 35 million acres of U.S. farmland? That's a plot of land about the size of Iowa. And we're not just talking about friendly investors from, say, Canada or the UK. We're talking about nations with, how should I put this, complicated relationships with us. Countries like China and Saudi Arabia are buying up big chunks of our farmland. Now, if you're like me, you might be wondering, why does this matter? I mean, it's just dirt, right? Wrong. Today, we're going to unpack the potential threats this presents to national security. I'm going to walk you through why foreign ownership of farmland isn't just a business transaction. It could actually become a security risk if we're not paying attention. Food isn't just a resource, it's a weapon, and in the wrong hands it can be wielded in ways that impact our economy, our sovereignty, and ultimately our safety. So grab a cup of coffee or, something stronger if you're really feeling the weight of this, because we're diving into some serious stuff today. But don't worry, I'll make sure it's easy to digest. Let's kick this off. All right, folks, let's start by answering the question on everyone's mind: who is buying up all this American farmland, and more importantly, why? Now, we've all heard about big real estate deals where some mega corporation buys up a skyscraper or an entire block of houses in a city. But when it comes to farmland, the buyers might not be the first names that come to mind. We're not talking about a couple of wealthy individuals looking to start a hobby farm or a group of eco-conscious investors trying to save the bees. No, the buyers in this case are often foreign governments or state-backed enterprises from countries like China, Saudi Arabia, and even European nations like the Netherlands. Let's get specific here. According to the USDA, China alone owns around 200,000 acres of American farmland. You might be thinking, okay, that's not so bad. We've got millions of acres. But let me throw this stat your way. Saudi Arabia's total ownership of U.S. farmland comes in at over 100,000 acres. And here's where it gets interesting. Saudi Arabia is using that farmland to grow alfalfa, a crop they desperately need to feed their cattle back home. You know what happens next? They ship that crop back to Saudi Arabia. We're essentially exporting water and resources to a desert nation using American land. Think about it. American soil, American water, American crops, all going overseas. Doesn't sound so harmless when you put it like that, does it? But it's not just Middle Eastern countries or China. European countries like the Netherlands and the UK have also gotten in on the action. And to be fair, these purchases might not raise too many eyebrows. After all, these nations are allies, right? Well, yes, but foreign ownership, regardless of who's holding the title, poses a series of risks we have to consider. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Bennett, Why is this happening in the first place? Great question. It boils down to a few key factors: food security, investment, and strategy. First, food security. Countries like China are worried about feeding their own people. You see, China's got a lot of mouths to feed, about 1.4 billion, give or take a few million. And while China has farmland of its own, it's been grappling with environmental issues like desertification, water scarcity, and pollution that make farming a challenge. So what do? They start buying up farmland overseas to secure their food supply. It's like they're stocking up for the long haul. Second, there's the investment factor. Farmland has proven to be a solid investment over the years, highly stable, with consistent returns. And let's face it, land isn't exactly something you can make more of. So, foreign investors see an opportunity to park their money in a reliable asset that will appreciate over time. It's kind of like buying gold, but with the added bonus of growing crops on it. And third, and this is where it gets a little more strategic. Foreign governments aren't just looking at farmland as a food source or a financial investment. In some cases, they're playing the long game of geopolitical strategy. By owning land in the U.S., that's where foreign nations have a foothold and influence within our borders. They can control not just the land, but what's grown on it and who benefits from that production. Now, this is where we need to start thinking bigger. It's not just about, oh, they're buying land. It's about why they're buying it and what happens next. I'll bet some of you didn't even realize this was happening on such a large scale, and you're not alone. It's not exactly something you see on the evening news, right? But it's happening quietly, slowly, and the stakes are enormous. Think about it this way. Imagine you're at a barbecue and everyone's brought a dish. Suddenly a stranger shows up and starts filling their plate with your food. You wouldn't think much of it at first. Sure, take a burger, no big deal. But before you know it, they're loading up their car with your cooler, your grill, everything. That's when you start asking questions. Well, folks, foreign farmland ownership is like that stranger at your barbecue. And if we don't start asking questions now, we might wake up one day and realize all the best land in the U.S. has been picked clean, and we're left wondering what happened. So now that we know who is buying and why, let's move on to the bigger question. What does all this mean for our food supply, and how could it be used against us? Now that we know who's buying U.S. farmland and why, it's time to dig into the real issue: how this could affect our food supply and, by extension, our national security. At first glance, foreign ownership of farmland might seem like just another business transaction, but when you consider how crucial food production is to a nation's stability, the picture gets a lot darker. Let's get straight to the point. Food is a weapon. Throughout history, controlling a population's food supply has been one of the most effective ways to exert control or manipulate outcomes. You cut off food, and people get desperate. Economies collapse, governments crumble. Now, I'm not saying foreign governments are buying U.S. farmland to starve us out tomorrow, but the fact remains that whoever controls the food supply wields serious power, especially in times of crisis. Let's consider a hypothetical scenario where diplomatic relations between the U.S. and China go south, seriously south. Say there's a major geopolitical conflict, maybe trade sanctions or something even bigger. If China owns a significant chunk of our farmland, they suddenly have leverage. They could dictate what gets produced, or worse, they could stop production altogether on land that should be feeding Americans. Imagine a situation where during a global food shortage or supply chain disruption, you find out the crops being grown on American soil are being shipped overseas. That's not just a bad business deal, that's a threat to national security. And it doesn't stop with food production. A lot of people don't realize how interconnected food systems are with things like water and energy. Take Saudi Arabia, for example. As I mentioned earlier, they're growing alfalfa on American farmland to feed their cattle back home. But here's the kicker. They're using our water to grow those crops. In places like Arizona and California, where water is already scarce, we're allowing foreign entities to drain resources that should be prioritized for American farmers and communities. The long-term environmental impact of this could be devastating, and once that water's gone, it's gone. This isn't just about running out of resources either. It's about who controls them. Imagine foreign countries using our farmland not just for food, but for espionage or other subversive activities. You think it sounds far-fetched? Think again. These vast expanses of land could be perfect for placing surveillance equipment, testing new technologies, or conducting operations that we wouldn't even know about until it's too late. The potential for espionage and covert activities is real, especially when foreign state-backed companies are involved. We're giving them physical access to parts of the country that could be used in ways that have nothing to do with agriculture. Another layer to this issue is agricultural technology. American farmers are known for being at the cutting edge of agricultural innovation. Things like GMOs, precision farming, and advanced irrigation techniques. If foreign entities control the land, they also gain access to this technology. And let's be honest, this isn't just about growing corn more efficiently. These technologies have potential military applications as well. If foreign governments gain access to them, we could be looking at an entirely new kind of security threat, where agricultural technology becomes the next frontier in cyber or biowarfare. But let's take a step back and look at this from another angle. What happens if foreign control over farmland disrupts the market for American farmers? Farmers here already face massive challenges: rising costs, fluctuating market prices, and increasing competition. If foreign entities can flood the market with their products or manipulate the supply to drive up prices, it could cripple the American farming industry. And once our domestic farming industry takes a hit, we become even more dependent on foreign imports. That's a dangerous cycle to fall into because it makes us vulnerable on multiple fronts, economically, politically, and strategically. Now, here's the thing. I'm not suggesting we go full isolationist and refuse any kind of foreign investment. The global economy is interconnected, and investment from abroad can benefit industries. But when it comes to something as essential as food, something that directly impacts every single citizen's daily life, the risks of foreign ownership are too significant to ignore. National security isn't just about defense contracts and military alliances. It's about securing the basic needs of the population, and food is at the very top of that list. So, to sum this up, foreign ownership of U.S. farmland isn't just a quirky business trend. It has the potential to directly threaten our food supply, drain our natural resources, and undermine our national security. The implications reach far beyond agriculture. They touch every aspect of American life, from the economy to technology to geopolitical strategy. If we don't start paying attention to this issue now, we could find ourselves in a situation where we've given away control over the very resources that keep our nation strong. Next up, we'll be talking about the economic impact of this on American farmers. How does foreign ownership affect those who are already struggling to make a living off the land? And what does it mean for the future of U.S. agriculture? we talk about foreign ownership of farmland, the conversation often revolves around national security and resources, and rightly so. But there's another layer that affects the heart and soul of rural America: our farmers. These men and women have been the backbone of the U.S. economy for centuries, often working long hours in tough conditions to ensure we have food on the table. But with foreign entities buying up more and more farmland, the economic landscape for American farmers is shifting, and not in a good way. Let's start with the basics. Farming isn't exactly a high-margin business. Most farmers in the U.S. are operating on razor-thin profit margins, constantly balancing the cost of seeds, equipment, water, and labor against the unpredictable nature of crop yields and market prices. Now throw in the fact that multinational corporations and foreign governments, entities with far deeper pockets, are competing for the same land. You see where this is going, right? When foreign entities buy up large parcels of land, they're not just displacing the average American farmer, they're distorting the market. Farmland prices have been steadily rising for years, and part of that is due to increased demand from foreign buyers. For a family-owned farm that's been passed down through generations, this is a huge problem. When land prices skyrocket, it becomes almost impossible for smaller, independent farmers to expand their operations. Heck, in some cases, they can't even afford to stay on the land they already own because of the rising costs of property taxes and competition from these foreign buyers. This dynamic puts farmers in a real bind. They're faced with two options. They can either sell out to these larger entities or they can try to compete. But here's the thing. Competing is often an uphill battle. Large multinational corporations or foreign governments can afford to take losses for years, investing in advanced technologies, buying in bulk, and securing favorable terms from banks or governments. The average American farmer doesn't have those luxuries. They're operating season by season, praying for good weather and fair market prices. The playing field isn't just uneven, it's tilted heavily in favor of the big players. But it's not just about farmland prices and competition. It's also about market manipulation. Foreign-owned farms, especially those controlled by state-backed enterprises, often aren't playing by the same rules. For example, a foreign government might subsidize their farms, allowing them to sell crops at artificially low prices. This undercuts American farmers who are trying to make a living in a free market without the same level of support. And when American farmers are priced out of the market, we lose more than just a few family-owned farms. We lose our food sovereignty. The U.S. becomes increasingly dependent on foreign-controlled resources to feed its own people. This kind of economic imbalance doesn't just affect individual farmers, it affects entire rural communities. When farms close down or get sold off to foreign entities, local economies take a hit. Small towns across America rely on farming as their economic engine. When farmers struggle, so do the businesses that depend on them. Everything from equipment suppliers to local diners to feed stores. And once a farm is sold to a foreign entity, the money made from that land doesn't stay in the community. It goes overseas, further draining the local economy. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a small farming town in the Midwest. For generations, this town has been built around the local farms. People work in agriculture, kids grow up working on their family's farm, and the local high school football team is the pride of the community. Now, imagine that farmland is sold to a foreign corporation. Sure, some of the locals might get jobs working for that company, but it's not the same. Decisions about what to grow, how to manage the land, and where the profits go are now made thousands of miles away. The sense of ownership, the pride, the connection to the land, all of that starts to erode. And as that happens, the local economy falters and the town begins to shrink. We've seen this happen in industries like manufacturing, and now it's happening in agriculture. And here's the kicker. It's not just the land that's being affected, it's also the future of farming itself. As foreign entities buy up more farmland, they also gain control over agricultural innovation and technology. American farmers have always been at the cutting edge of farming technology, whether it's precision agriculture, irrigation systems, or genetically modified crops. But when foreign companies control the land, they also control the adoption and implementation of these technologies. And guess what? They might not have the same incentives to invest in long-term sustainability or innovation as American farmers do. In fact, their priorities might be entirely different, focused on maximizing short-term profits or shipping crops overseas to feed their own populations. This is where the real danger lies. If we allow foreign ownership of farmland to continue unchecked, we risk losing not only our agricultural independence, but also our ability to innovate and lead in this critical industry. The future of farming in America shouldn't be dictated by foreign governments or multinational corporations. It should be shaped by the people who have been working this land for generations, the farmers who know the soil, who understand the challenges, and who have a vested interest in the long-term health and sustainability of the land. So, what's the solution? Well, we'll get to that in the final section, but for now, it's clear that the economic impact of foreign ownership of farmland is real and significant. It threatens the livelihoods of American farmers, the stability of rural communities, and the future of agriculture in this country. And if we don't address it, we could find ourselves in a situation where we're not just outsourcing our manufacturing, we're outsourcing our food production too. In the next section, we'll take a look at the regulatory landscape. What laws are in place to address this issue? Are they enough? And what's being done, if anything, to protect American farmland from foreign control? When it comes to foreign ownership of U.S. farmland, one of the big questions is, what's being done to regulate this? As it turns out, the answer is a bit murky. The U.S. has some laws in place to address foreign ownership, but they're often fragmented, inconsistent, and in many cases outdated. This section is all about the rules of the game, or lack thereof, and whether the current regulatory framework is enough to protect American interests. Let's start by looking at the primary federal law that addresses foreign ownership of agricultural land. The Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, AFIDA, of 1978. This law requires foreign investors to report their purchases of U.S. farmland to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the thing. AFIDA is primarily a reporting mechanism. It doesn't actually prohibit or limit foreign ownership. It just requires foreign buyers to disclose their transactions. So, while it's a step in the right direction, it doesn't do much to stop or even slow the increasing foreign ownership of farmland. AFIDA also leaves enforcement up to the states, which creates a patchwork of regulations. Some states have enacted their own laws to limit or regulate foreign ownership of farmland, while others have no such restrictions at all. For example, states like Iowa, Minnesota, and Missouri have laws that prohibit foreign ownership of agricultural land. But if you look at states like Texas, there's no such restriction. In fact, Texas has some of the largest amounts of foreign-owned farmland in the country, much of it bought by investors from China and Saudi Arabia. So depending on where you're standing, the rules can be very different. This patchwork approach creates some pretty significant gaps. For instance, a foreign entity that's restricted from buying land in Iowa could easily purchase farmland just across the state line in Missouri. There's no uniformity, and that inconsistency makes it hard to develop a national strategy to deal with foreign ownership. It's like trying to plug a leaky dam with your fingers. Cover one hole, and water just starts flowing from another. What's more, UFEDA and many state-level regulations don't address the broader issue of control. In other words, a foreign entity could set up a shell company or a joint venture with an American partner to purchase farmland and still skirt the reporting requirements. This isn't just a theoretical loophole, it's happening right now. There are cases where foreign investors have used U.S.-based subsidiaries or partnerships to acquire land without triggering the same disclosure requirements. So, while it might look like the land is owned by a U.S. entity on paper, the real control lies overseas. Another layer to this regulatory mess is the role of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS. CFIUS is a federal body that reviews foreign investments for potential national security risks. It was originally set up to focus on things like technology and defense-related industries, but in recent years, it started to pay more attention to agriculture, especially after some high-profile acquisitions of farmland near military bases. For example, in 2021, a Chinese company bought over 130,000 acres of farmland in Texas, which raised concerns because the land was close to a U.S. Air Force base. CFIUS has the authority to block foreign investments that pose a risk to national security. But here's the catch. Its reviews are typically limited to transactions that involve mergers or acquisitions of U.S. businesses. In other words, if a foreign entity is just buying raw land, no business attached, CFIUS might not get involved at all. This means that large swaths of farmland could be bought up by foreign entities without triggering a CFIUS review, even if that land is near sensitive military installations or critical infrastructure. So, where does this leave us? Well, the current regulatory framework is clearly full of holes. FIDA provides transparency, but not much in the way of actual enforcement. State-level laws are inconsistent and create loopholes that foreign investors can easily exploit. And while CFIUS is starting to pay more attention to agriculture, it's still limited in scope and effectiveness. The bottom line is that there's no comprehensive national policy to address the growing issue of foreign ownership of U.S. farmland, and that's a problem. Now, there have been some attempts to tighten regulations. In 2021, there was a push in Congress to introduce new legislation that would give CFIUS more power to review agricultural land deals, but the bill has yet to gain traction. There's also been talk of expanding FIDA to include stricter limits on foreign ownership, or to create a more centralized system for monitoring and regulating these transactions. But as of now, none of these proposals have made it into law. The problem is addressing this issue is politically complicated. On one hand, foreign investment can bring economic benefits, jobs, infrastructure, and development. On the other hand, there's a very real risk that we're sacrificing long-term national security for short-term financial gain. And as with many political issues, there are powerful lobbying groups on both sides of the argument, which makes it even harder to pass meaningful reforms. But here's the truth. We need a national strategy. We can't keep relying on this patchwork of state laws and outdated federal regulations, whether it's through expanding CFIUS's authority, tightening FIDA's requirements, or creating new laws that directly address foreign ownership of farmland. Something needs to change. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where foreign entities control a significant portion of our agricultural resources and, by extension, a significant portion of our national security. So, is the current regulatory landscape enough? The short answer is no. There are too many gaps, too many loopholes, and too little oversight. And if we don't start taking this issue seriously, we're going to pay the price down the road. In the final section, we'll talk about what we can do to fix this, what solutions are on the table, and how can we protect U.S. farmland from foreign control without stifling economic growth. Stay tuned for some actionable ideas and a path forward. Now that we've covered the scale of foreign ownership, the risks it poses to our food supply, the economic impacts on American farmers, and the gaps in the regulatory framework, the big question becomes, what can we actually do about it? How do we strike a balance between protecting our national security and maintaining a healthy, open economy that benefits from foreign investment? Let's be clear. Foreign investment in the U.S. isn't inherently bad. It's a key part of our economy, contributing to job creation, innovation, and infrastructure development. But when it comes to something as fundamental as our farmland, the land that feeds our nation, it's essential that we proceed with caution. We can't afford to treat farmland like any other commodity. So, what solutions are on the table, and how can we start addressing this issue effectively? 1. Strengthening federal legislation. First things first, we need to overhaul the Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, AFIDA. Right now, AFIDA is more of a transparency tool than a safeguard. It allows us to track foreign ownership, but it doesn't prevent or limit it. What we need is to expand AFIDA's scope to include actual restrictions on foreign ownership of agricultural land, especially when it comes to entities from countries that pose potential national security risks. One option would be to set clear limits on how much land any foreign entity can own, either nationally or within individual states. Some countries, like Australia and Canada, already have such limits in place to prevent foreign dominance over their agricultural resources. By capping the amount of farmland foreign entities can own, we can ensure that the majority of our food-producing land remains under domestic control. The limit could be tied to specific percentages or acreage amounts, ensuring that no foreign country or entity gains too much influence. Additionally, AFIDA could be expanded to require deeper background checks on buyers from foreign nations, particularly those where the state has significant influence over private companies, such as China. This would give the USDA and other regulatory bodies more authority to scrutinize who is buying the land and for what purpose. It's not enough to know who owns the land. We also need to understand their broader strategic motivations. 2. Enhancing the role of CFIUS. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, has already begun to take a more active role in reviewing agricultural land deals, especially those near sensitive areas like military bases. But CFIUS's current mandate is still limited, and its reviews primarily focus on business acquisitions rather than raw land purchases. We need to expand CFIUS's authority so that all significant foreign purchases of agricultural land are subject to national security reviews, especially when the buyers are from countries with adversarial relationships with the U.S. This would allow the government to block purchases that pose a national security risk, not just in terms of proximity to military installations, but also when they involve critical infrastructure like water resources, key supply chains, or major food-producing areas. CFIUS should be empowered to take a broader view of national security, one that includes food security, water access, and environmental sustainability. One potential improvement would be to create a specific agricultural division within CFIUS, staffed with experts in farming, food security, and environmental issues. This team could focus exclusively on agricultural land deals, ensuring that the national security risks associated with foreign ownership of farmland get the attention they deserve. 3. State-level reforms. While federal reforms are essential, state governments also have a crucial role to play. As we've seen, some states have already taken steps to limit foreign ownership of farmland, but these laws vary widely in effectiveness and enforcement. What's needed is a more coordinated approach at the state level, where states with large agricultural sectors like Texas, California, and Iowa adopt similar standards for foreign ownership. States could enact legislation that mirrors or strengthens federal restrictions, particularly in regions where water resources are already strained or where large swaths of land are being bought up by foreign entities. States could also implement more aggressive property tax policies that incentivize local ownership, giving American farmers a competitive edge when bidding on land. This is especially important in states where agriculture is the primary economic driver. By keeping land in the hands of local farmers, states can maintain stronger control over their food supply while supporting the economic sustainability of rural communities. 4. Support for American farmers. One of the most effective ways to limit foreign ownership of farmland is to ensure that American farmers have the resources and support they need to compete. Right now, many farmers are struggling with rising costs, market instability, and growing competition from multinational corporations. Without the financial backing to expand or maintain their operations, many are forced to sell, and foreign entities with deep pockets are often the highest bidders. To address this, we need to provide stronger financial support for American farmers, particularly small and mid-sized family farms. This could come in the form of low-interest loans, tax incentives, or subsidies aimed at keeping farmland in American hands. By giving farmers the financial flexibilities to compete with foreign buyers, we can ensure that farmland stays under domestic control. Additionally, federal and state governments could create programs that match willing sellers with local buyers, providing an alternative to foreign bids. These programs could prioritize young farmers or veterans who are looking to enter the agricultural industry, ensuring that farmland stays within the community while supporting the next generation of American farmers. 5. Promoting transparency and public awareness. Finally, one of the most critical components of any solution is public awareness. Right now, most Americans don't realize how much farmland is being bought up by foreign entities or how this could impact their food supply, national security, and local economies. We need to bring this issue into the spotlight, ensuring that people understand the stakes. One way to promote transparency is by making AFIDA's foreign ownership data more accessible and user-friendly. Currently, the information is available, but it's buried in government reports that most people don't have the time or inclination to dig through. By making this data more visible and easily understood, we can empower citizens to hold their elected officials accountable and push for more robust protections. We also need to encourage more media coverage of this issue. While foreign land ownership doesn't grab headlines the way other national security issues do, it's just as important, if not more so. Our food supply is one of the most critical components of national security, and we can't afford to let it fall into foreign hands without a fight. Moving forward. At the end of the day, the issue of foreign ownership of U.S. farmland isn't going away anytime soon. It's a complex problem that requires a multifaceted solution involving federal and state governments, regulatory bodies, and everyday citizens. But with the right safeguards in place, we can protect our farmland, our farmers, and our food supply from falling under foreign control. We can't stop foreign investment entirely, nor should we. But we can ensure that when it comes to something as vital as our farmland, the interests of the American people come first. With stronger laws, better enforcement, and more support for American farmers, we can preserve one of our nation's most critical resources for future generations. Let's be proactive. Let's recognize the risks before they turn into crises. And let's ensure that our farmland remains in the hands of those who work it and who are invested in the long-term prosperity of this country. And that, my friends, wraps up today's episode of Full Spectrum Frontiers. We've covered a lot of ground, literally and figuratively, talking about how foreign ownership of U.S. farmland touches on everything, from national security to economic stability. I hope by now you can see that this isn't just some niche issue for farmers to worry about. It's something that impacts all of us, whether you live in rural America or the heart of a big city. Food isn't just food, it's power. And the more we let foreign entities control our farmland, the more we lose control over one of the most critical aspects of our national security. But as always, I want to leave you with some optimism. Yes, the challenges are real, but so are the solutions. There's still time to act, to safeguard our food supply, and to support the hard-working American farmers who keep this country running. And I'm confident that with the right policies and a more informed public, we can protect what's ours. Before we wrap up, don't forget to do me a favor. If you found this episode insightful, please like, share, and leave a review. Your support is what helps grow this community of people who care about the full spectrum of conflict, national security, and how it all ties back to our everyday lives. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on Full Spectrum Frontiers. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and as always, keep pushing forward.
It's just you, me, and the odds. We stuck together, we two peas in a pod. You dealt a bad hand, I'm there seizing the cards. We'll never be separated till we see in the gods. We've been low together, high forever. Long as we go together, we'll die whenever. Be a light, couldn't let the darkness try you ever. Truth in my word, you I lie to never. And when the world gets a little too hard, wipe your eyes, put away your sorrow. When it's war, I'll be leading the charge, and I'll be still fighting for you tomorrow. Yeah, even with a blindfold or in different time zones, could find my way to you with my eyes closed. There's nothing between us. Go to Mars and Venus, stand in front of every one of them rocks, they slimming and be a shield. Yeah.
In the fiercest battle, I'll defend you. From all these arrows in the sword I will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield.
Yeah, let's go. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield. Let me be your shield, let me be your shield.
You may be facing tribulation, but don't let it get you down. What I'm saying may take patience, but you're gonna make it out. I scorched my own 2 feet to pull you to safety. When the fires are burning like crazy, carnage around take your place. I'll be your shield.